Hello and welcome to Faith Backstage, where we are having backstage conversations about faith, life, and ministry. I'm your host, Joey, and I am joined today by Ariel and Trey Fernald. Great to have you guys here.
Great to be here.
I want to fully disclose where we're at, which is that this is our second attempt at this conversation, because I don't want it to feel, it's ironic, we're talking about performance, but I don't want it to feel, performed. So we'll just get it all out on the table. We had some technical issues, hoping things go more smoothly from here on out. I'm delighted to have both of you here. I was sharing, this is my first episode in a long time. I was in COVID jail. I was in quarantine. My wife tested positive for COVID, and then because of the official CDC guidelines, I had to wait for her 10-day quarantine to be over, and then I had to start my 10-day quarantine. So it was like a 20-day quarantine.
Man.
And the crazy thing is that I never had symptoms. I never had COVID, but I got an antibody test, and I did test positive for antibodies, which means that I did have it. I don't know if it was then or at some other time. So, but yeah, I wasn't able to do any episodes for the last month or so. So I've missed doing this, and I'm really excited to have both of you on. I don't have very many couples on. You were married. And Ariel, you were on a little earlier, about a year ago, I think.
Yes, I was.
And we had a very long conversation. We had my longest conversation ever on this podcast.
Yes, I get the award for that.
Yes. I'm going to make you a trophy that you can put on your mantle and display proudly.
As we said earlier, when we were just talking,
yes.
I think it just shows how well we get along.
Yes.
And we just naturally connect.
Absolutely. We covered a lot of really great ground in that conversation. But Trey, I don't know you as well, and our listeners may not have heard that, and so I want to get to know both of you a little bit. So I want to start just by asking how you two met, how your guys' story starts, and kind of how you guys first connected.
Well, this is take two for our explaining how we met.
You got a rehearsal in.
So there's actually an interesting side story that I want to include in this.
Well, you're going to share that one
yes,
too? Okay.
Unless you want to. But we did meet at Chapman University.
Yes.
So in the late 80s, we were both attending college there. And we met. She was on the orientation team when I came in as a freshman. And we met my first day on campus, and I'm from Oklahoma City. So my parents moved me out. We drove out, and we met. We were friends for 3 years while we were going to college. And then we started dating. We started actually courting in London, England. There was a course that we took, a theater course that we took in London, England.
Yeah.
And we started going to see shows together, and the object of the course was to see a show and then sociologically write a paper on the setting and the backstory of all the shows that we watched. Mm-hmm. And so we spent a lot of time together. And something cool that happened, though, I think the second or third year that I was at Chapman was the chapel program on campus, the church program on campus, approached me about putting on a skit there. Mm-hmm. They wanted a little drama for one of their chapel services. No problem. We wrote a little script. I got a little cast together. I was from the theater department, so of course I had friends that I could just throw into this and everything. But meanwhile, Ariel was approached to sing at the same service. And so she got a group together. She interacted with the music department a whole lot, and so she was able to get her friends to come together and sing. So little did we know, we were the artistic portion of the chapel service, and it has been that way ever since.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So throwing in a few little fun details in that. In the first take, he's the one that said this, but he's the more bottom line, and I'm the detail person. But that was pretty good in terms of details.
Thank you. I tried.
So, but I just thought I would throw in there that it really was very prophetic to what we're doing, because at the time, I had gone to Chapman 4 years to get my degree, and he was the year behind me. And so I was then stayed on campus, was studying to take the LSAT, and was managing the communications department. Mm-hmm. And in those 5 years that I was at Chapman, I'd been to many services, partly because for a couple of years I was on the chapel staff. Mm-hmm. And I'd never seen the place packed. Mm. And
that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Time in 5 years that it was packed out was when we combined our giftings and created and really were the ones that produced that service. Everything about it was really produced by my husband and I. And so looking at it years later, just before we wrote, maybe a couple of years before we decided to write a book, that was when it just hit me one day. I said, do you realize like that was a foreshadowing for our life.
It really was, for lack of telling a pun, it was this staging point.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was the
So,
staging point.
yeah,
And
it
even,
was.
and also going to
And the type
London.
we got to tell them the type of crowd that was there. It was kind of what we're experiencing now with our ministry. And we do mention it in our book, but the kind of crowd that came to chapel that Sunday morning was, there was atheists there. There was people into New Age. There was people from the homosexual community.
Yeah.
They all congregated just because they loved us. We were friends with them.
Yeah.
But the message that went forth, I mean, they left with an impartation, of the gospel and the heart of God, and it was just amazing. And we've been doing that ever since. We've so excited to tell you about all the different points of impact that our productions have made and everything.
Totally. Yeah. I actually would just love to kind of jump right into our content. We're talking a really interesting topic. One that I don't think people often think of when they think of ministry. I have a lot of pastors and people who like are on staff at churches, or they run a young adults ministry, or they work in kids ministry, or they're doing some kind of work on a church staff. But this idea of like performing arts as ministry is, I think, something that a lot of people may not associate with church. And I actually wanted to start by asking if you guys are watching The Chosen, the TV series.
That's so funny. You know what? I've seen some of The Chosen, but I have to be totally honest and say I have not seen all of even the first season. And I think hopefully anyone that's involved in The Chosen is not going to be offended by that. But particularly when you are in this area of arts, you think we'd watch everything.
Yeah.
But we know so many people do so many different things.
Totally, yeah.
And we're working on our stuff, and we have 3 kids, so we don't watch a lot of anything, honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. We did see the first episode. It was a lot of fun to watch it, and so thankful that Dallas is being used to set the pace for raising money for something if a studio is not going to take it in, or if a production company is not going to get behind it.
Just trusting God.
Yeah, the way that team has gone out and said, you guys can make this happen.
Yeah.
The public can make this series happen. And that's impressive.
Absolutely.
And it's a precedence for the rest of us.
Totally. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to bring it up was because a couple weeks ago on the show, or actually it might have been a couple months ago at this point, there was a bit of a controversy. I don't know if you can call it a controversy because they seemed very prepared for it. Like the director did like an immediate Q&A about the controversy on this week's episode of The Chosen. But it was, I don't know if it's a controversy if you have a graphic ready before it happens. But it was basically, they depicted Jesus rehearsing one of his sermons that he was going to give. And I was delighted by this because personally, when I teach, I rehearse my sermons like 3 or 4 times.
Sure.
And I really do view teaching kind of as a performance. But I think that word performance is kind of a dirty word
it is.
in the church. But I think that in many ways, all of us are kind of performing in life.
Yeah.
And I think especially when a pastor gets up to teach, there is a performed aspect of that.
Yes.
And I think the idea of rehearsing just kind of speaks to like a desire for excellence, which is something that, God calls us to as Christians. So I'm really excited to cover this topic. And this is kind of just a long-winded way of asking, how can performance be used as ministry? Which is basically, you guys have written this book called Producing Drama for Ministry, which focuses on this idea. Yeah, feel free to show the camera. This idea of producing drama and this idea of performance for the sake of glorifying God. Yeah. So what can that look like, and how can performance be used as ministry? Whichever of you wants to jump in first.
What we do say in our book, and I know there's so much more to talk about besides these points in our book, but what we do say in our book is that there are 4 goals with drama ministry. And that could be the umbrella for dance, worship, and other things as well. But the first goal is illustrations. Performance is great for illustrating a point that a pastor or teacher just can't specify enough.
Yeah.
Illustrations are wonderful, and obviously Jesus did that. It says in Matthew 13:34 that Jesus spoke to the multitude in parables, and without a parable, he didn't speak to them. And so illustrations is a wonderful way to use drama or use the arts. The second would be evangelism. We have seen so many beautiful testimonies by just having an excellent production presented but with the gospel in there, communicated somehow, some way.
Yeah.
We've had people come to actually two specifically, we've had two different women, very transparent after the production. They came up to our counselors, our prayer team, and they said, I was thinking about suicide. I was actually going to take a bottle of pills this weekend, but someone forced me to come to this play.
Yeah.
And then they got prayer, and they joined a women's group for one of them, another church, another community. Same thing. I was going to kill myself today. And they gave their life to Christ, and they got baptized, and they joined that church that we were performing at. So just amazing things with evangelism. And then the third goal is worship. Using the arts to worship, exalt Him. The beautiful thing about worship is there's not a lot of rehearsal necessary. You pretty much do your gift. If it's dancing, then you can maybe rehearse the dance, but ultimately there's not like, oh, hit this mark at this point, and you look at the cue cards and memorize your lines, and there's not a lot of production layers with worship. So that's beautiful. And then the drama can be used that way as well with human videos and things like that. And then finally, community outreach. Community outreach is powerful. Just down the freeway at Shepherd Church, they have one of the most popular Easter productions in all of Southern California, The Passion. And it's strictly outreach. It's just reaching the community, but also living out the passion and the gospel and illustrating it to people that may never have seen it or experienced it. And so those are our 4 points with the arts. There's other points, there's other reasons to do it in ministry, but these are the ones that we've banked on for almost 30 years now.
Those 4 points are really the reasons why we want to use drama for ministry and how we can use it effectively. I want to make the point that when we talk about drama for ministry, that it's the broad sense of the arts. It's the broad sense of drama, which is acting or theater, music, and dance. And that we were just having a conversation today about how there are giftings that are truly a blessing for us to be able to share those parables that Jesus talks about. And in history, if you look back, there's always been this kind of love-hate relationship with the church and the arts.
Yes, that's one of the things I want to hone in on a little bit.
When that, with the, and it's with music, it's with dance, and it's with acting. And one of the things that always drives me a little crazy is when we decide that, well, you know what? We can trust music and we can have music, but dance is of the devil, you know, or acting, we can't trust acting, you know, because that could have a little too much influence on the people. And the reality is they're all in the same vein. You know, Lucifer had this great gift of singing. He had this great gift of music, I should say, not just singing, but music. And it was so powerful that when he fell, he was able to take a third of the angels with him.
I've never thought about it that way. That's really interesting.
If you think about that, he was able to take, I don't believe it was he was that beautiful and that charming. I think it was also he had that powerful a gift. And so when we look at the gifts that we have, that God's put in front of us, the artistic gifts, what can we do with that power and that influence? And all 3 of them working together for the kingdom, you know? And so for us, it's just saying, you know, these are gifts that God's given us. These are talents we don't want to bury. And everything that has breath should praise the Lord. Everything should point to Him. And we can do it in such a beautiful way in the arts.
What do you think it is that makes, I don't know if I probably shouldn't attribute it specifically to evangelicals, so I'll just like Christians in general. Keeps Christians or makes the arts so, it makes Christians nervous a little bit. The idea of arts, things being artistic, things being creative. Where do you think where do you think that aversion comes from?
Do you mind if I jump in on that?
Well, I was going to say that it's a lot of irresponsibility. You know, it's doing it and then someone drops the ball. Someone's not responsible. Someone's not reverent. If you really look at the history of theater, it takes a beautiful trip through Europe with pageant plays. And in England, around the time of Queen Elizabeth, this is pre-Shakespeare, the pageant plays were wagons, sort of like a parade, like the Macy's Day Parade. You know, you got your little wagon or your little truck that drives, and you got your thing that you built on it, and it's real neat and attractive and everything.
Yeah.
Well, they did that with wagons back in pageant play days, and it was the gospel. So you would have Genesis all the way to Revelation.
Interesting.
And the one that everyone was fascinated by was the Revelation, because of all the exciting stuff. You know, you got the devil, you got the Antichrist, you've got Jesus coming on a white horse, and you know, you got all this exciting stuff, this drama, that comes on that final wagon. And so it was really exciting. It was a way for the church to minister to the different communities in London, but at some point, there was some irresponsibility. People didn't trust the pageant wagons, that they were honoring the gospel the way they should. They weren't honoring the Bible the way they should.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of controversy, and they just folded that thing up and said, we're not doing it anymore. And people got too nervous, and they moved on, and that's where Shakespeare stepped in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
that could be a great movie, but that whole plot, everything you just said, that could be a movie plot.
Oh, it could. It could. I think also there is just the fear of the idolatry that can come with it. Is the fact that if you just look at it today, you know, a worship leader can turn into a rock star really easily.
Totally. Yeah.
And a performer in a drama program can become a mini celebrity.
Yes.
You know, but the reality is pastors can become celebrities in that same way. So it is a human condition for those who are put up in front of someone who have a gift that a lot of people are afraid of. And this person has the boldness and the courage to use it. There's an awe of that person, and there can be this idolatry of them. Like I said, whether it's a speaker, a dancer, a singer, anyone who gets up in front of people, the reality is that people literally are more afraid of being up in front of people and would rather do that. I would not, you know, they don't want to do that. They'd rather die. Like, it's a bigger fear, you know, it's like there's death and being in front of people. So so if I can get up in front of people, whoa, you're amazing, you know? And so that idolatry and that power that comes with it, I think is something that the church is really cautious of. And then there is that, as Trey pointed out somewhat too historically, that the church used parables, it used drama to share the gospel and to disciple in teaching when the general population was illiterate.
Oh, yeah.
So you have someone who's speaking, but it was brought in as something that would represent and would share, and it was culturally relevant. It was just like Jesus used parables, that those stories that he's told were ones that they could relate to. When he talked about the harvest, when he talked about whatever it was he talked about, people could relate to that in their everyday life. Well, when we do parables, it's the same thing in theater. I can relate to that. And so they used it. Well, as long as those parables having that effect and are communicating what I want as the leadership or as the authority in the area, that's great. But when it goes against what I want to do, what I want the people to think or know, it becomes a challenge. And so at times when the church was corrupt, the church didn't want the arts.
Right.
And because they couldn't control it. And then other times, if the art, as Trey said, was corrupt, they didn't want it. So we've had these periods throughout history of the world with that back and forth.
Absolutely. Someone, a good friend of mine once pointed out, we were serving in kids ministry together. And at our church, we have these songs that we do. And he pointed out that a lot of them kind of sound, you know, that they're Christian songs with, you know, based on a Bible verse or whatever. But they kind of sound like, you know, like an 80s rock song or like a 2000s, like, you know, punk rock song, like, or even like a country kind of stadium pop type song. And he goes, at some point, it went from the church inspiring art to art inspiring or culture inspiring the church.
Yeah, we have to be very careful.
Like mimicking and create, and it's like, when did that flip happen? Like, and why did that flip happen?
Yeah, a long time ago. It's happened throughout history, and so I think one of the key elements that we have to focus on when we do incorporate the arts into ministry, because it happens on the mission field all the time. They use arts all the time on the mission field to communicate. It's a universal language.
We almost always, when we do mission trips down to Ensenada, we almost always do some kind of skit, play element.
Yes.
Transcends language.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Totally. So to do it, you have to have strong leadership. You have to have leadership that is part pastor, part producer. You can't have one or the other. You can't have all pastor, or it's going to be stifled.
Yeah, totally.
You can't have all producer, or it's going to be chaos. And we have a beautiful comparison. You know, there's the Jesus film. That's one of the most viewed films in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
And they had amazing leadership that had the evangelism on their mind and missions on their mind from day one once they got the rights to it. So you got that leadership that did great and mighty things with that film. Then you got Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right.
And there was the leadership over that was just about making money. You know, you know, the Broadway play was amazing, so now let's make it a movie and we're going to make millions. We're going to have the greatest soundtrack ever. And there was drug use on the set.
Is that Andrew Lloyd Webber?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drug use on the set. There was inaccurate telling of the scriptures. There's horrible theories that were communicated.
Yeah.
You know, but it started with the leadership.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So leadership is so important. There has to be reverent leadership that can communicate why we do theater in the first place, why we do the arts in the first place.
Yeah.
And there has to be a recognition of what the goal is and always needs to be.
Yeah.
When we're presenting parables, when we're presenting drama for ministry, that it is for ministry. And I think those that are looking at ministry and they're looking at the arts and how it's used there has to also be a clear understanding of when they're looking at something that I need to know who the leadership is behind that.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, for instance, if you are someone that sat and watched Jesus Christ Superstar, as it was presented, I don't know how many years ago, was that 4 years ago?
50s.
No. I'm talking about on Easter. They did it as a live play
NBC.
production on NBC.
A couple of years ago.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Not that long ago, maybe 3-4 years ago.
John Legend.
Yes.
Yeah, I watched it. It was pretty well
Yes.
done.
No, it was very well done.
Yeah.
But for me, I have to tell you, it was very frustrating.
Absolutely.
I was absolutely frustrated that was the choice. Because if you do any research whatsoever on the production, you find out that the purpose of that was the entire production. The message is Jesus was just a man. He was not the Son of God. Yeah. So to present that, to choose to say, I have a public forum of millions of people across the earth on Easter Sunday to present something and to present that was a worldly choice. That was a choice of something that is a production that's about Jesus, but the message of it, the goal of it, from the very heart of the leaders of it, was to tell the story that Jesus is just a man. He was not God. Right. That's why in the story you see him with all people come around him that are ill, they're sick, and he's like, no, he's buried in them, right? He doesn't perform one miracle. Yeah. He shows nothing that shows him as God. He is at the end of it on the cross. And then people walk away like, well, show's over. Because that was the heart of the leadership. So to me, as a believer, to take something in like that and say, or an unbeliever to take that in and think that that's representative of our faith or our God. Yeah. Is wrong. Absolutely. So we really have to educate people, and we have to be aware of the choices that we're making to represent Christ through drama.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, have either of you seen Godspell by any chance?
Yes.
I like Godspell. I think that one does a little bit of a better job of representing gospel truths. Maybe not perfectly, but and then Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat is also one that I enjoy.
Oh my goodness!
I haven't checked it for theological accuracy lately, but I like the music. Is all I'm gonna say.
It's sort of like Cats. It's just supposed to be a good time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, to me, I compare it a little bit more to Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
I wonder if the person was smoking something. In the name of Jesus, of course, but when they put it together, because there's just... It's a little out there. It's a little out there.
It is a little out there.
It is a little out there.
I grew up on it. My dad showed it to me a lot. And so the music, the songs I still remember. And so it's a little nostalgic for me. Donny Osmond and whatnot.
Yes,
so much
I know.
fun.
I saw it live.
Oh, fun. That's awesome.
Brought my kids.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to say it's a little out there. It's a little out there.
We were talking about art in the church, drama in the church, performance in the church, and why people might be a little resistant to that. Another word that came to mind as you were talking was uncomfortability. And how art, drama, performance sometimes makes people a little bit uncomfortable when someone is on stage performing, doing something. I feel like it makes people be like, what's going to happen? Like there's almost like a little bit of tension in the room, which I think is in some ways what you're going for. But I wonder if you've ever experienced that as like a resistance of people just being a little bit nervous about like what's going to happen on stage. What's this person going to do?
Yeah,
I think there's two elements to that can be corrected if it is scary or wonky or what have you. The first thing is the culture. Does the church culture offer the arts on a consistent basis? Right. And if the answer is no, then when something's shown for the first time in several years or several months or whatever, you're kind of wondering, are they going to pull this thing off? What are they trying to tell me? What are they communicating here? But if there's a beautiful, responsible, reverent culture provided at the church, then the audience is going to welcome it like they would welcome a worship set. So there's that. But also you've got to have excellence. So we make a point to make sure our theater company is trained. And if they already are trained, then we just make sure we keep an eye on their choices. Actors and directors, believe it or not, that's a partnership. And the actor will make their choices and put themselves out there. And then the director says, let's talk about your choices. Right. I like this. I don't like that. Let's change that. Or change all of it, or don't change a thing. So we make sure that whatever is put up on the platform at a church is excellent. It doesn't have to be the thing that wins everyone to Christ or anything like that, but it does have to be solid. And so, again, it comes down to leadership. That leadership would make sure that is the case. And that way people can trust the culture.
The culture. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I also think that there is a flip side of that that I've experienced that is very much on the positive. And that is that people love theater for the fact that there's a connectedness between the audience and the performer. The performer feeds off of the audience's energy. Totally. And you're in it together. And so it's completely different. I can be sitting in the dark and staring at a screen and for hours, and there's no real relationship here. Totally. But when there's someone just a matter of feet away or in the same room, there is just a different connection between the two of them. And so people that have not had that experience before, I feel like it's going on a roller coaster for the first time. There's an anticipation like, okay, if they mess up, it's messing up in front of me. There's
I'm connected to it.
I'm connected to it. There's no second take, and I could be embarrassed and But once they've had that experience, like Trey said, and it's a positive one, they go, "That was a ride. That was a rush." Totally. You know what I mean? And they enjoy it, and enjoy the fact that afterwards they can interact with the people that were up on stage, which is part of the beauty of what we've been able to do. And ministering, marrying that producing and pastoring is training people that are involved in ministry to be able to minister afterwards, to be able to get off that stage and pray for someone, to love on them, to pass them over to resources at a church that we're working with or an organization or ministry that we're working with. And that is something that doesn't happen when you're in film. It doesn't happen when you watch it up on the screen. But I have a connection with you, and I watched that character that you did, and I relate to it. And I just feel like I can come right up to you and talk to you in a way that just doesn't happen.
And I'm sure if you felt a personal connection watching with a certain character, getting to like talk to them in real life would be really cool.
And we do that. We train our actors to be prayer counselors. So at the end of a production, our actors that you've taken the journey with for 2 hours or an hour or whatever, they get to come up and just say, "Can you pray for me?" They just feel like you went through something that I'm going through.
Totally.
You know.
Yeah. There's two things I wanted to say to kind of what you guys shared. One is that the cultural aspect I totally understand. The church that I'm a part of, many years ago, was pretty deep in performing arts. It was a major part of our culture, the annual calendar, things that were going on. We had two pretty major productions, one at Christmas, one at Easter.
Yes.
That involved lights, camera, action, lots of costumes, lots of huge sets. Like it was a pretty extravagant setup that we had that we did, and over the last 15 years, it just kind of transitioned out of that. We don't do those anymore. Performing arts is not a focus of our culture. Now, I think to bring it back would be really getting like thrown in like an icy lake for a lot of people. Like they just wouldn't be ready for it. And so I think, to reintroduce that would take a little bit of hand-holding and small doses at a time.
Yes.
But the other thing I was just thinking while you were talking about just that connection on stage is, man, I really miss theater. I mean, just like COVID, like I have not been at a live show in a year and a half, and that was something that I used to do a lot. Even like performing art, like a drama or a play or a musical, yes, but even like a concert, like I just miss seeing anybody on stage performing. I'm gonna have to find somewhere that's some college that's doing a performance and go check it out.
Yeah, we missed that too.
That
we were scheduled to do something for Easter 2020.
Yeah.
You know, we were all scheduled to travel down to San Diego, and we had this powerful dramatic piece that was going to be performed, and
that's awesome.
Suddenly it was all shut down and over. We can't do it. We're not going to be there, so don't come down.
That's really tough.
Yeah.